Welcome back to the news today. This is the Daily Debate. The mystery gets bigger and bigger by the day. The Sony hacking attack, thought to be carried out by North Korea, already sounded like something out of a movie. The story gained added, let's say, intrigue when North Korea's internet was temporarily unplugged after Obama promised a U.S. response to the Sony hack. Speculation is everywhere about who did it, and if it was the United States, it could be a violation of international law. With me tonight to understand a little bit better if it's a new war, if it's a new world war, is Esti Peshin, head of the Cyber Directorate of Israel Aerospace Industries. Good evening. Thank you very much for coming. And also Menny Barzilay, cybersecurity strategist and member of the Yuval Ne'eman Workshop for Science, Technology and Security. Good evening. Thank you very much for coming. Before we will start discussing this matter, let's see what our viewers had to say about this. Ayman, good evening.
Yes, good evening, Lucy, and good evening to our guests in the studio. As you mentioned, cyber attacks have been making headlines around the world lately, not only because of the scope of the attacks, but also because they're invoking possible violations of international laws. We asked our viewers today if they believe attacks on online outlets can in fact make a difference. We asked them, are cyber attacks an effective weapon? We received many comments supporting cyber attacks today, and we'll get to that later on. But first, let's review the results of our daily poll. As you can see, Lucy, 81% of our viewers voted yes, that cyber attacks are an effective weapon. Only 15% voted no. But let's see what our viewers wrote to us today on Facebook and Twitter. And let's start with Masan, who tells us, yes, cyber attacks damage both the system and government information. Large groups of film production, like Sony, suffered material damage. So he's making a point here about the potential financial damage of cyber attacks. And as we know, Sony stands to lose millions of dollars following the hack on its system. Pierre elaborates on Sony, and he says, yes, cyber attacks are effective. The proof is in the cancellation of the release of the film The Interview after threats made against Sony. He goes on to say, a war with fewer deaths but strong economic consequences is our future. So a grim point to consider here about the types of war we're likely to witness in the future. Next up, Bashir writes to us, it is very effective because such an attack allows hitting a powerful entity in its weakest point. It's effective especially for those who do not wish to identify themselves as the attacker. And this is interesting to think about because, as we know, North Korea still denies hacking into Sony, and the US, on the other hand, denies the shutdown of North Korea's internet on Monday. And let's just end with Alan, who tells us, unlike former wars, this cyber war does not generate spectacular images of explosions, buildings in ruins, or injured civilians, but the number of its victims is growing by the day and already has some of the biggest names in technology sector, finance, and defense have been hit. So extremely strong views in support of cyber attacks today, Lucy. Overall, it seems that even those who condemn this form of attack can't deny how powerful and effective it is. Then again, the same was said in the past for actual weapons, like nuclear weapons, and that did not pan out well at all. With that, I'll leave the discussion to you and your guests, Lucy, sending it back to you.
Thank you very, very much, Ayman. This is the new weapon of our days. This is the, let's say, the new way to fight big countries, and we see, and allow me to be a little bit skeptical and raise a question, really? The United States is not standing behind this just like in a mysterious way, 9 hours, no internet, no nothing, just being unplugged?
So what's the actual question?
So I'm saying that it seems too mysterious that the United States, after being hit in such a big way and maybe humiliated even, it's more of a humiliation than even losing money or losing more of a war of prestige, that the United States won't attack on this. But should the United States get into this kind of game, war game?
So when you look at the cyber domain, and it is indeed a domain of war, potential domain of war, there is one characteristic which is extremely effective, and this is the fact that it is extremely difficult, practically impossible, to attribute an attack to a singular attacker. Now, this is an attribute of the domain. Okay. Since it's an attribute of the domain, why not utilize it? Why admit if you can deny, and have everyone speculate about your
Around it.
power. So the attribution challenge is an inherent challenge in the cyber domain, and it causes something extremely powerful. The fact that effectively in the cyber domain there is no deterrence. Now the reason for this is since an attacker can attack anyone without practically any cost, because the other side cannot necessarily attribute the attack to himself, then attacks become very cheap. So why admit if you can deny?
Well, admit if you can deny, and it seems that it's not, of course, it's not going to be easy for me, but for some people it is very easy to do that. Very, let's say, it's out there, but it is doing a great damage. Economy, prestige, especially when it comes to that the United States is actually deciding, or Sony Pictures is actually deciding to not screen the movie because they might be hurt and lose money or lose whatever they are going to lose over this battle or battle of powers.
So this is very interesting. We see a private company, we see Sony, standing in the middle of cyber warfare or of act of war between North Korea and the United States. And this is actually not the only example for that. We see more and more private companies actually participate in the cyber warfare. The case of the NSA and Edward Snowden, where the NSA connected Facebook and Microsoft and other companies to take information, intelligence-related information, to promote the United States national security agenda. This is another example of how private companies actually participate in cyber warfare.
But we are talking about private companies, and the loss for a private company can be much bigger than a loss for a country. And when we're looking at this current situation, it seems that Sony is, in one way or another, got into a fight with a country, which is not, it's not the United States against North Korea, it's Sony against North Korea, which makes this, what, fair? Is it fair to get into it or to see it that way?
So no, you're totally right. So what we see in the cyberspace, you cannot put the army between the country that attacks and the private company, right? So if North Korea attacks Sony, suddenly the information security guys needs to actually cope with a country. Can they do that? And the question is, where does the responsibility of the country stops and the responsibility of the company begins? And this is a very important question. And there is no answer for this question right now. There are different people who are trying to create this discussion. In Israel, there are several groups that try to answer this question. But currently, we don't have an answer for this.
We don't have an answer for this? Or?
And if I may elaborate a little bit, today the world is becoming extremely interconnected. And there's this trend going on that is called the Internet of Things, which basically says that you will be connected with everything. Essentially, your refrigerator will be able to speak from you. You will be able to command it to warm up your food before you come home. Now, consider a situation where all the refrigerators in a certain country are connected to the internet, and someone attacks this connection and causes all the refrigerators in the country to warm up the food. And let's assume that this happens during maybe a war or a crisis, and all the food in all the houses in a certain country are now spoiled. This would affect each and every citizen in the country. The cyber war does not extend only to companies. It extends to each and every individual.
You know, what you're saying is although you're drawing it in such a, let's say, a daily life matter, and maybe in a beautiful way, it's really scary. It's really scary on the level that it's considering each and every one of us by just having a phone, having a computer at home. You know, usually army goes and do some drills before they're going to the battle. What kind of drills are you doing? Is Israel, for example, doing to try and prepare for such an attack on my refrigerator, for example?
So there are various aspects that need to be handled. First and foremost, awareness. Now, each and every citizen must be aware of the inherent threats when he's connected to the cyber domain, either through his mobile phone or through his laptop or through his desktop computer. And today, practically every citizen is connected in one way or another. Each and every citizen needs to be aware of the threats within social media. For example, social media is a domain with significant opportunity, but also with significant threats, significant risks. So this is number one, awareness. Then there is protection, and protection needs to be achieved in the national level, but also in the sectorial level, the company level, and the personal level. Finally, there's policy. And a lot of work is being done, and I'm sure that many can elaborate on how to grasp our minds around the policy that needs to be employed in Israel. Also, this is done also in other countries. Should we, for example, decree certain restrictions on certain companies in order to make sure that they are more cyber-proof, etc.?
You know, what is worrying is for in one point or in one way or another, we brought this on ourselves because we caused this our information to be out there. We got into Facebook, we got into Twitter, we got into Instagram, etc., and it seems that this is like a snowball that we're not able to stop, because if I'm leaving home without my mobile phone, I feel like I'm lost. Mm-hmm. And can you put a limit to that these days? Can you say, okay, I need to stop this?
So this is a very interesting question, because it's important to understand that this is not the peak of an era. This is just the beginning. So as time will go on, we will, as humanity, will become more and more dependent on technology. And as we become more dependent on technology, the risks derived from the cyberspace will increase. And indeed, we see that it actually private people are facing those risks. So when you saw the attack on Sony, it wasn't just Sony, it was also the employees. So they took...
The actors?
So the actors and the employees, so they took private and sensitive emails, maybe some secrets of the employees, and they published them as well. And the same way you cannot separate the private sector from the homeland security sector today, you cannot separate the employees from the company. And this is a very effective attack, because if you are actually telling Sony, if you will publish this movie, we will harm you financially, this is one thing. But if you're telling Sony's employees that if they will publish this movie, they will be hurt. Their secrets will be revealed, maybe their families will be attacked. This is a different level of threat, and this is a very effective way to actually threat on a company.
You know, it's not only threatening, like you said, on a company, is actually when will be the line. You said that there should be a policy, but for me, like countries like North Korea, where only certain people have internet and only certain people have like the control over it, it means that it gives maybe sometimes the governments more control on our lives when I want to be more of an individual these days. So where is this game going to just giving in to the government, giving into these technologies, or trying to protect myself and caving in and saying, okay, this is life and I need to progress?
So there's always a fine balance between privacy and security. By the way, in everything, not only in the online domain, not only in the internet domain, not only in the cyber domain. There's a fine line between privacy and security. You need to concede some of your privacy in order to ensure that you are more secure, and this is definitely true in the cyber domain. But I think, we are painting a very pessimistic picture, and many said outright that this is the beginning of an era. And I think that on a more optimistic view, there's a lot of opportunity in cyberspace. And obviously there are threats, but the threats materialize because this is a new domain. It is relatively a new domain. And industry, and especially the Israeli industry, has a significant role in controlling this domain and making it more secure for all of us, individuals, companies, governments, countries.
Do you want one last segment?
Yeah, so we have to ask ourselves, did North Korea win? Because you might see that production companies will not be willing to fund next movies that might actually deal with the same subject. So they might already won. And I totally agree with what you just said. We have to be aware on both the risks and the opportunities.
I have just to ask you, and you cannot, if you don't want to answer, you cannot answer. Just, do you have smartphones, both of you?
Yeah, obviously.
Yes?
Of course.
Okay, so I'm not alone, so I can keep mine. Thank you very, very much for coming to the studio. And thank you, our viewers. We're going out for a small break, 2 minutes. Keep your smartphones. I'm coming back for one-on-one. Don't go anywhere.